We've all heard it said, he only gets that way when he drinks. She wouldn't have hit me if she wasn't using. It's a story that sounds simple, but it hides something deeper. Substance use doesn't create abuse. It doesn't turn a kind person cruel. It doesn't erase choice. Abuse is about power, control, entitlement, and the belief that someone else exists to absorb your pain. And when addiction enters that system, it doesn't erase the control. It reorganizes it and gives it cover. We're going to look at the research, the myths, the patterns families live out, and the truth survivors already know. Because accountability doesn't end with sobriety, and the truth deserves its turn. Hello and welcome. I'm Bonnie Adams, a family therapist and host of Off the Beaten Couch. Thank you for joining me for episode 1 of The Truth About Addiction and Abuse. In this series, we're going to untangle what's really happening when substance use and coercive control collide. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I think it's important to be aware of not only the impact of addiction on families, but also how addiction and abuse often go hand in hand, allowing the abuse to go unnoticed, dismissed, and minimized because it's masked by addiction. Before we begin, a few important notes. This video discusses intimate partner abuse, coercive control, manipulation, and substance use. Some content may be triggering. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, please pause or step away. You're not alone, and you deserve safety, respect, and care. If you are in immediate danger, please contact local emergency services. This series is for awareness, education, and support, not a substitute for legal or medical advice. If you or someone you know is in danger, contact authorities or a trusted organization. Today, I want to tackle a powerful myth that shows up everywhere: that substance use causes someone to be abusive. Let me start with a short vignette. It's fictionalized but based on many real accounts. A couple sits down to a calm dinner. He seems relaxed. They laugh, they talk. In the evening, he goes out. She thought the night was fine. Then he returns drunk, angry, shouting, insulting her, threatening her, isolating her from reaching out to friends. The next morning, remorse, tears, promises, and she wonders, did the alcohol make him violent? Many people ask that question. Did the substance make him abusive? That framing, that substance use causes abuse, is so common, but it's also so misleading and harmful. Today, we're going to look at a clear evidence-based reframe that substance use is a risk factor and not the root cause. What the research really shows, the correlations, the limitations, the nuances, and how substance use can exacerbate but does not originate coercive abuse. Why does this reframe matter? Well, it matters for the victim's safety, for abuser accountability, and for treatment and intervention approaches. So let's jump in. Here's the myth. Substance use causes someone to become abusive. And this myth is everywhere. It's in popular culture, it's in excuses, it's in courtroom pleas, it's in public discourse. He was drunk, she's on pills, he only does it when he uses. These statements only rationalize or excuse. But here's the reframe I want you to carry with you. Substance use is not a cause of abuse. It is a risk factor, a catalyst, and a potential amplifier. But abuse itself is a choice. It's rooted in patterns of control, entitlement, power, and emotional strategy. Let me say that again more plainly. The presence of alcohol, drugs, or addiction may increase the likelihood or intensity of abuse in certain moments, but it does not explain away or justify the decision to abuse. The controlling tactics, the emotional manipulation, the coercion, those are chosen behaviors. Now, why is this framing so important? Well, it preserves accountability. If we say he only does it because he drinks, we excuse the choice. It acknowledges the complexity and patterning of abuse. Many abusive behaviors occur independent of substance use, like emotional abuse, surveillance, isolation, financial control. It helps victims see that leaving or resisting isn't merely a battle with substances, but with entrenched power dynamics. It guides more effective intervention and support. Treating substance use alone will not dismantle coercive control. And this is something that many treatment centers completely overlook and loved ones assume will be addressed. Anger and emotional regulation may be included in some of the programming, but this programming does not address abuse and coercive control. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine someone you know or have heard about whose partner only gets bad when drinking. If you replace the framing to, he chooses to abuse, the alcohol may worsen it, how does that shift what you expect of accountability, safety, and intervention? All right, with that groundwork laid, let's dig into what the science actually shows. To make the case, we must see what the research actually shows. Let's walk through it carefully. Now stay with me here because this can get a little bit heady. So first, a key study often cited is the 2018 study of Cafferty and colleagues, and you can Google this. This is a meta-analytic review of substance use and intimate partner violence. A meta-analytic review is basically when a researcher pulls together findings from multiple studies done. And in this review, they aggregated dozens of studies and found a small to moderate positive correlation between substance use and both perpetration and victimization. Now, it's important to remember here that a positive correlation does not necessarily mean one variable is responsible for another. You can spend hours at the gym and not see results. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not working out enough. There could be a whole host of other factors at play. What that means is that higher substance use is statistically associated with greater likelihood of intimate partner violence. But, and this is crucial, that is association, not causation. So what are the limitations and the caveats in interpreting such findings? Well, I'm going to list them. So first we have directionality and bidirectionality. Directionality is determining which variables cause change in another relationship, and bidirectionality is a relationship where both variables mutually influence each other, like a feedback loop. So if bidirectionality is not recognized, one can assume a single cause and effect link. Does substance use lead to abuse? Or does abuse lead to substance use, like coping? Likely both in many cases. Some longitudinal studies suggest that abusive dynamics can precipitate escalation of substance use in survivors or even perpetrators. Now, there are confounding variables and shared risk factors like underlying personality, trauma history, mental health like depression or PTSD, socioeconomic stress, adverse childhood experiences. Many of these contribute both to substance use and abusive behavior. For instance, childhood exposure to domestic violence raises risk for both substance use disorders and use of controlling behaviors, as well as becoming a victim of intimate partner violence. Then there's the subgroup and heterogeneity differences in effect size, and that's just a big fancy word for the strength of association that can vary depending on type of substances like alcohol, opioids, and stimulants, the frequency context like binge user versus chronic user, and individual traits like impulsivity and comorbidity. And that means somebody who may struggle with mental health issues along with addiction. So some studies show stronger associations for alcohol than illicit drugs. Others find stimulant use trials more strongly associated with aggression. Many analyses do cross-sectional designs, and these are just snapshots of the results. They're not longitudinal, so they don't go over a long period of time. So they can't tell whether substance use precedes abuse incidents. Studies that examine momentary intoxication effects, like drinking episodes linked to assaults later that night, show increases in risk, but that's different from saying use causes long-term patterning of coercion. Another limit is measurement and reporting bias. So there is a bias in self-reporting, like underreporting, especially in abusive dynamics by both the abuser and the victim. It's quite common. And selective sample populations, like through criminal justice or help-seeking samples. These can skew findings. Because of all these limitations, the research community is careful not to ascribe a simple cause. The most common responsible conclusion? Substance use is a moderate risk factor, often present, and sometimes facilitating abuse, but not the root cause. Let me share a qualitative insight that helps illustrate this complexity. In 2019, Gilchrist and colleagues conducted a study called a meta-ethnographic synthesis. This is a systemic method for synthesizing findings from multiple studies to produce new insights and a deeper understanding of a topic. In this study, survivors described substance use as a tool. He only gets bossy when he's drinking. Sometimes he gives me drugs, so I'll stay hooked. After smoking, he's more paranoid and more controlling. But in those same accounts, they shared that even when partners were sober, control, threats, isolation, and emotional abuse still persisted. So the narratives from lived experience align with what the numbers show. Substance use often intertwines with abuse but doesn't fully account for it. One more data point. A 2025 study by Schick and colleagues examined patterns of substance use, like the frequency, intensity, combinations, and found that certain patterns correlated more strongly with intimate partner violence risk, but emphasized that substance use did not fully predict or explain abusive behavior. Bottom line, again, the data support association, not causation. That is, substance use may raise the odds of abuse in particular contexts, but it does not impose abuse. So now let's shift to how substance use interacts with abusive behavior in real lives. Because even though substance use doesn't cause abuse, it often exacerbates or amplifies it. And that matters for safety, risk assessment, and intervention. Here are the major pathways through which substance use can worsen abuse or make it more likely in certain moments or relationships. So first we have inhibition, reduction, and disinhibition. When people are intoxicated or in withdrawal, their impulse control is weakened. They may overreact to frustration or perceived slight. A partner's criticism, refusal, or request can be interpreted as threat. This increased reactivity can escalate conflict into aggression. Emotion dysregulation and negative affect amplification. Substance use, especially heavy or chronic use, can destabilize mood regulation. Anger, jealousy, paranoia, and irritability all become magnified. If someone already uses coercive tactics, these emotional surges can intensify those tactics or lower the threshold for deploying them. Creative excuse or rationale. Intoxication can be used as a pseudo justification. I didn't mean it. I was drunk. It's the pills. I can't help it when I'm high or low. Those rationalizations deflect accountability and make it harder for survivors and outside systems to hold them to account. It's a pretext for control and manipulation. Substance use can be weaponized. For example, an abuser may force or coerce the partner into using substances, sharing them, controlling access, or using intoxication to manipulate or dominate. We're going to explore this deeper in episodes 2 and 3. Episodic risk and escalation. During heavy use episodes, binges, blackouts, and withdrawal states, the probability of severe incidents increases. Even abusers who are usually calm may commit more extreme harm under intoxication stressors. It creates a barrier to intervention, treatment, and help seeking. Substance use can isolate the victim more. More secrecy, more shame, more denial, and fewer supports. It reduces clarity, it interrupts legal processes, it muddies perception, and reduces follow-through. It's important to stress that these are amplifications, not root origins. In many relationships, abusive patterns like threats, gaslighting, surveillance, and financial control are maintained during periods of sobriety or even long stretches of abstinence. Let me give you a few short case examples, and these are completely fictional. So a man with alcohol dependency who verbally threatened and stalked his partner after drinking heavily, but also, when sober, he monitored her phone, punished her for disrespect, and refused to let her contact friends. A partner coerces the other into occasional use of substances as a condition of intimacy, then uses the addiction to blame or guilt, to demand loyalty, or to degrade. These mixed examples show that substance use can heighten harm, but the controlling architecture of the relationship is built even during non-intoxicated periods. Another point, when people reduce or stop use, sometimes abusive behavior continues or even intensifies. It's called the dry rage phenomenon. That persistence confirms that abuse is not dependent solely on substances. So in sum, substance use can worsen, accelerate, intensify abuse in particular contexts, but the decision to control, threaten, manipulate, or harm is not invented by chemicals. It's embedded in choice, strategy, and power dynamics. Abuse during sobriety confirms pattern beyond substance. We've covered a lot. Myth, research nuance, and the ways substance use can intensify abuse without causing it. So let's pause for a moment and take a few deep breaths. Maybe this all hits a little close to home. I know it does for me. Trying to survive in these dynamics is nothing short of a miracle, and I can sympathize deeply if you are now or ever have navigated this. Addiction is isolating enough, but adding in abuse only makes it that much more terrifying. All the tools and suggestions that people throw out to get a restraining order or just leave seem absolutely impossible, and they likely are. An order doesn't offer absolute protection, and victims of abuse are not as protected as the general public would like to believe. But there is hope, and there is help. There's a link posted in the description of this video to help you find resources in your area. Now that we've dismantled the myth, let's talk about what really matters, how this reframing affects how we respond, support, intervene, and heal. These are my ideas of how we need to overhaul and really respond to this problem, and maybe you can use it as a checklist for what to look for when reaching out for help. We need to heighten accountability. If we treat substance use as the cause, we risk excusing behavior, shifting blame, and diminishing responsibility. But if we see abuse as a choice plus pattern, then accountability rests with the person using those tactics, regardless of intoxication. That means that courts, legal systems, and therapists must assess patterns of control, not just isolated intoxicated incidents. And I can tell you from personal experience, this rarely happens, if ever. Oftentimes, the abuse is masked by the addiction and completely overlooked by those who might possibly help. Not many people are trained in noticing the signs of abuse or how a victim of abuse might present in a session or at a hearing. Also, the abuser might be a really smooth talker and appear to have remorse, which might deflect from the bigger issue at hand. Treatment models should require abusive behavior change, not just sobriety. Currently, I am unaware of any that address this. So if you know of any, please link them in the comments. I'd love to be able to provide resources to others. Survivors should not be told just wait until he's sober as a solution, but they are, or at least made to believe that sobriety will bring the miracle of no more violence. Many addiction programs focus purely on substance problems, detox, relapse prevention, 12 steps, etc., etc. But when a person has used addiction to justify or mask abusive behavior, addressing chemicals alone is insufficient. Effective integrated approaches include, if you're looking for some, parallel treatment and accountability, substance treatment plus specialized domestic violence perpetrator programming. Now, where I live, one's got to be certified by the state to provide intervention services for abusers. There aren't many, and what is available is relatively brief. Trauma-informed modalities that explicitly address patterns of control, entitlement, hostility, and power dynamics. Safety-first couples work, only after sustained evidence of nonviolence and agreement to accountability, and always with external safeguards. Finding a family therapist in your area that is trained in this is imperative. Restorative justice models, where appropriate, that allow victims to have voice and agency, not just addict rehabilitation. Safety and risk assessment. Because substance use can amplify risk, safety planning must consider substance-related escalations, like withdrawal periods, binge cycles, intoxication, and spikes. So safety planning should include identifying high-risk windows, like weekend binges or after parties. Safety fallback plans when intoxicated behavior escalates. List out trusted contacts who can intervene or provide shelter. And document the incidents, like the dates and times and the context, including substance use context. Empowering survivors and shifting public narrative. So many survivors internalize shame or guilt, believing if I only managed him and avoided triggers and begged him not to use. It was never just about the substance. It was about the decision to harm and control. Public narrative matters. If communities, courts, and families think he was drunk, so it's not entirely his fault, They reduce accountability and harm survivors. We must assert that abuse is a pattern, not a byproduct of intoxication. Here are some challenges and caveats. This isn't easy. Some barriers are denial, rationalization by the abuser, oh, I was high. Resistance in systems like courts and clinicians to see beyond substance. Again, there aren't many in the court system or within the counseling field who are adequately trained to know the signs to watch for. The addiction is blamed, and it's believed the abuse will stop once sobriety is reached. Survivor skepticism or internal conflict. Was it the alcohol or was it her? Risk of minimizing substance treatment's importance? No, we still want to treat addiction, just not to let it overshadow abuse dynamics. As you continue this series, you'll see how we build on this reframe to name coercive tactics, design safety plans, and support accountability while honoring healing. Now let's bring all this home with some real-life examples and common questions. Example number 1. He says he only loses control when he's drunk, but when I deny him, he punishes me even when he's sober. That punishment is the real abuse. The intoxicated assault is the most visible moment, but underlying control dynamics extend beyond those moments. Example number 2. If he never drank, would he be safer? Maybe, maybe not. But that question is speculative. What matters is how he acts now, whether sober or not. Many abusers restrain when sober and lash out when drunk. Others continue patterns regardless of substance. Example 3. Can addiction cause brain changes that make someone more aggressive? Now, while it's true that chronic substance use, especially heavy alcohol, methamphetamine, and other stimulants, can alter brain function, emotional regulation, and compulsivity, those neurological changes are risk enhancers. They do not override moral agency or entirely dictate behavior. People with brain changes can and do choose differently. So now what if someone truly loses self-control while intoxicated? Is there ever an excuse? In the context of abuse, the standard cannot be they were too drunk to know. That standard risks excusing violence. We must distinguish genuine loss of control from the choice to use coercion and harm. Now, how might we talk to someone who believes the myth, like a friend or a family member? We can say, I hear that you see the substance as the reason, but I wonder, what patterns do you see even when they're sober? And does that narrative fully account for all the control, threats, and manipulation? Let's look together at the broader pattern. Okay, so right now, feel free to pause, reflect, or rewind parts of this episode to absorb it. I know that was a lot, but I believe in being educated and informed. The more you know, the better you can help yourself to do what is best for you. Loving someone through addiction is one thing, but abuse is never okay. Thank you for staying with me through this first foundational episode. Let's recap the most important takeaways. The myth that substance use causes abuse is misleading and harmful. The research supports correlation, not causation. Substance use is a risk factor or amplifier, not the root origin. Many control tactics and coercive behaviors exist independent of intoxication. Reframing matters for accountability, for intervention, and for survivor clarity. As we move forward in this series, we will dig deeper into coercive tactics, how addiction is weaponized, safety planning, and treatment and accountability integration. In episode 2, we will explore tactics of coercive control in partners with substance use. How isolation, surveillance, gaslighting, threats, and financial control manifest in relationships with addiction. If this episode resonated, please like, subscribe, and share with someone you trust, and leave a comment, but only if it's safe. I'll see you for episode 2, and until then, be gentle with yourself, keep seeking truth, and know you deserve safety, respect, and care. See you soon.